for thank you again for inviting me and for those kind words. So let's get started, dive into the topic that we all are, I guess, striving towards. It's easier said than done, right? Um, so I'm just going to get this that so I don't get distracted by this screen. We are talking about distractions. Um, building connection through presence, and we are in a world full of distractions, full of demands, full of responsibilities, full of expectations. So that is hard thing to do, to be fully present. But that's why we are meeting together to share some ideas about how we can cultivate that, because we know that that's what's shown in research to be an important factor to build that connection, which is a foundation of compliance or a great relationship with your child. I think no matter how many material gifts or things you get to them, what really matters to every child is that connection, that acceptance, that non-judgmental acceptance, that ability to be with the parent and be accepted as they are. And for us to be able to do that, we really need to practice mindfulness. That's where it comes in again. Only when I am cultivating that habit or building that muscle of attention and trying to put everything in the back burner and being in the present, I'm able to fully see the child for who they are, what's going on for them, and I'm able to model that for them as well. So, children do feel much more valued when you give them undivided attention. We know that it fosters trust and emotional security. Particularly so, when they are younger, that becomes even more important. And I think I've talked about this before. I say that our window right now with this current Gen Zs and alphas is from 0 to 10. Like it used to be 0 to 13 2 years ago. That's what I would say. Like before they go to teenage, space, while they are children and tweens, catch them. But now like, oh no, let's catch them before they turn even 11, because the level of smartness and exposure these kids have, they are just not there after even getting into middle school. They are usually trying to be very independent, and so that is your window. And if you somehow missed that window, not intentionally, but because of various things we talked about, the demands and the stress we live in, it's never too late. Because again, that is the way to really have a meaningful relationship, expect great compliance of what you want them to do to be happening. I mean, that's what research is showing over and again, and that's why we need to work towards this. So I really love this cartoon. I used to be like this, and a lot of our parents are like this. Even if I, here, we have a pet, but I actually would take my daughter to park when she was younger after work. And I would think like, oh, I'm being such a great mom. I'm taking her to the park, and, I'm spending some one-on-one time. Um, but guess what? When she was on the playground, on the slide, or whatever play she was engaging in, I was going through my to-do list, my phone, my messages, my phone calls, and you know, um, that's what we think we are doing. Like we are there, and there were times where she would be maybe looking at validation from me, like, hey, I just climbed this monkey bar to this level, or hey, I just kind of slipped and I scraped my knee, and I would be clueless, and maybe I would find myself paying attention to it a couple minutes later or a few seconds later. And that wasn't certainly being mindful. My mind was definitely full with lots of clutter in terms of the to-do list and things to do, stuff from the day that didn't go right or whatever. But I was really not being fully present. And that's kind of what one needs to shift towards. And when I first got into mindfulness around that time, she was 6 or 7 years old back then. I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to make a big switch here. And it has taken, of course, time and effort to come to a little bit. I'm not quite here yet, but come in the middle at least. So we need to, focus on cultivating these few things as ways to be fully present. Um, so attention should be on the current moment. Recognizing emotions and needs, building that self-awareness and awareness around, your child in this particular context of parenting. This is true for all relationships, by the way. But since we're focusing on mindful parenting, I would say that's the need. And then, accepting that I can't be a perfect mom or a perfect dad. Like I think we live in Silicon Valley with a lot of perfectionist people around us. A lot of perfectionist people end up in the field of engineering, law, being doctors and whatnot. And that's kind of what we have, that's ingrained in us as this is your core belief that drives a lot of your thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And so really embracing imperfections, even though there was a moment in the park for 5-10 minutes, I was clueless what my daughter was doing. If I made an effort to even be present for the next 5 minutes, that is great. I wasn't a perfect mom, but I was trying to juggle balls and I was able to do it consciously for some time at least. That's my step of, the beginning step. I can work towards that and not get critical about it and not get down on yourself about I am not doing best here, I'm not doing best there. Um, so I think that has become like a very big source of stress and anxiety, the perfectionism. I see that, of course, in a lot of the parents I work with and a lot of kids. I think it's kind of like lot of it is probably genetically transmitted, or that's what we are modeling. So they are seeing that's the way to function. A lot of kids are struggling with perfectionism, and now we have a whole new type of therapy we are kind of inventing to address perfectionism, as that can be such a big driver for anxiety and stress. So self-compassion, embracing imperfections, good enough mother or good enough dad is the way to go. Good enough employee is the way to go. Good enough friend is the way to go. Like embracing all those roles and being okay with just being okay. That's really a hard thing to do, but that's what's the need of the hour in terms of prioritizing your self-care. And then, again, we all are well intent and we have good intentions. We're well intended in terms of wanting to have that connection. We crave that connection with our child. But really, to get there, we need to kind of overcome or find ways to overcome the distractions. So what are some of the strategies? So I think setting some healthy boundaries is very important in terms of prioritizing self-care and family time. So if, we all can practice, I've talked about a little bit about that technology-free zones, like during dinner table, during, um, car rides, like, you pick during bathroom time. There are few absolutely no technology zones that if we can implement and model that for our kids, they can really also build those healthy boundaries. You may have work meeting after dinners. I know people work in different time zones. There's a lot of demands that way. But if you can figure out your schedule and define some like times for yourself and say, okay, this is my time and this is what I'm doing right now. Even if there's a work call I need to be preparing or getting on to after dinner, I'm going to work on that, get that thing done earlier in the day so I'm not, preoccupied by that. So it does need a little bit, of course, of better time management, better discipline, and having some boundaries that you define. And it's a trial and error method. You may try this and it's like, oh, this is not quite there. I need to revamp this. I need to kind of change what I'm doing a little bit differently and see where I land. So it could be a process. It doesn't need to be like you figure it out overnight and you kind of know exactly what to do. And then, of course, creating routines for connection. So this is certainly really, really important for children. And when I say children, I'm talking about 0 to 10. That's the age group that listens to us. That's the age group that wants to be with us, particularly. And I'll talk about how we do this with the tweens and teens as well. But there has been two strategies that have been researched and found to be super effective. One is known as positive attending. Basically, in that, the rationale is your child is building Legos or building blocks. You're sitting next to them, and all you're doing is being a neutral observer and a commentator, almost like you're just making a running commentary about, oh, you just put a red block over the blue block, and now your tower looks a little bit bigger. Oh, that block fell off. Let's, see how you can make it tall again, whatever. You're being just neutral observer and you're just doing that positive attending where you're not really criticizing, correcting, praising. We are not even talking about praising here. We are not even talking about saying great job, good job. Like, it's just being absolutely positively attending and being there with them. And this could be something you could do for a few minutes. It doesn't need to be the whole half hour you're sitting with them. But even if you did it for the first 5, 10 minutes, that's really what the child can really feel good about. The second strategy is, having that special time with your child. And so figuring out what activities they like to do, when they're younger, you can do things together like coloring or making Legos or whatnot. You can go for walks. You can, there can be many different things. For slightly older kids, we can do things like joining them where they are. So a lot of the tweens, are into video games or Minecraft and whatnot, like Roblox and all this world that we are not like aware of how that is for them. We may be not happy about them spending hours on that, but how about we become curious and join them and say, hey, why don't you teach me how this game works? That's your special time. So you're finding the things that your child is interested in doing and you're joining in there. If it's in the world of social media, you're like, hey, I'm intrigued about what happens on Snapchat and Instagram. Can you kind of, if they're not, you're not, they may not be open to having you see their profile. They should, if you've had like a nice device contract and all that set in the beginning, especially if when you're trying to help them navigate this world. But even like, can you help me create an account? Can you help me navigate how this works? What are some of the perks of this? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? So, joining them in things that they are interested in is really a way of finding that source of connection. And when you are being curious and non-judgmental, they can really embrace that and teach you. And then they will, it goes both ways. If you are trying to do stuff that you don't like, but they like, they get the message, okay, I'm going to now be okay with going for a little hike or a walk with my mom, even though I don't particularly like that. It's a two-way street. It becomes just very beautiful if you try to take that first step. So positive attending and special time, that's where you're building this foundation for this long-term relationship to be strong. Of course, for all of these things to happen, you need to practice mindfulness, build that muscle of attention and non-judgment, and also build that muscle of curiosity and kindness. All of that kind of stems from being mindful. So of course, if you're like already had a long day and you're like, oh my gosh, I promised my child I'm going to spend 20 minutes with them reading this book or building the Legos, and you're exhausted and you have 10 things on your mind, demonstrating that in front of the child. Like, I've had a long day, I'm a bit tired, I have a presentation to work on tonight, or I have a presentation to do right after dinner. So, really being transparent as to what's going on for you, what's going on in your internal world and emotional world, and saying, but you know what, I'm going to practice some breathing. I'm going to just calm down, put that all in the back burner, and I'm going to do what I promised to do with you. And modeling that. And you may not be able to have 30 minutes, but even if you did that for 10, 15 minutes and you kept your word and you kept your routine, they love that. They know you're trying and they will continue to participate with you. So often like doing exercises together, checking in and saying, how was your day? I had these rough parts to my day. I had these great parts to my day. What were your roses? What were your thorns? And talking about, that sometimes with an older kid and saying, okay, let's kind of go and take some fresh air. Let's stretch. Let's, take some deep breaths. Let's do 5 jumping jacks, whatever that is to ground yourself, to get yourself back into that moment. um, so again, like I said, choose an activity. Usually, it could be even like, oh, let's walk. It's summer, and you like to have ice cream from this place. Let's do the walk and get to the ice cream parlor and have an ice cream together. Playtime, meal, whatever is important. Whatever you feel like is reasonable and within your means and able to do. And again, when you are there, you need to really demonstrate you're there. So some of the ways we can do that, practice that active listening that we were talking about last session or the session before last, like really being there with full attention, full senses, 5 senses, making eye contact, noticing their body language, acknowledging their expressions and distress or appreciation for what they are noticing, really showing some genuine interest. And again, this doesn't need to be for hours. It doesn't need to be even for 30 minutes. It can be for 10, 15 minutes, and that is golden. But that 10, 15 minutes, you are putting everything's, behind, doing your own ways to ground and be mindful, and then showing that to them. Um, and then, if you're um, doing this on a routine, just check in. How did that make them feel? How's this going? What's working? What's not working? And tweak accordingly. um, and so, of course, playtime can be really a nice way to engage with the kids. So that is certainly true for younger kids. For older kids, you find the play that they are interested in. If they are interested in a particular sport, watch the games together, have a conversation about that, watch movies or shows that have that focus and have a conversation around that. So you just need to find that for your child, and every kid is different and every kid has a different interest, but join them where they are, and then have some moments of laughter, fun, and not every moment needs to be praising only. It doesn't need to be correcting only. Kind of remembering that praise to correction ratio every time. And keeping it aside most of the times. But if you're feeling like, oh, now this is a moment for me to do some lesson learning or teach some lesson, go for it. If you're having good time where you've had some of that quality time and now you're like, okay, this is probably a great opportunity to bring up something that I've been intending to, and seeing how it's going, feeling the pulse of the situation. If it's like that's not something they're ready for, finding another opportunity for that and not pushing your agenda. So, of course, like you guys beautifully talked about the challenges to being present. I think a lot of us wear a lot of different hats, and it's a really hard thing to kind of be fully present. But within that, if we can sit down and figure out what can be some of the things I can do within the constraints I have, and practicing, those ideas and seeing what works, where you find that balance. That's really important, because there's no other solution but to really finding the solution by doing some introspection, by looking at what's important, what is the priority, how do you prioritize yourself. Before I came into the world of mindfulness and spirituality, and even though I was like a doctor and doing psychiatry residency and fellowship, and got a lot of understanding about how important mental health is, um, it was kind of late until I realized that my priority for life was really kind of upside down. So it was always work comes first, family comes second, and I come third. And I think a lot of us do that. We think that's where we are bound. That's we are duty bound. Those are like, and particularly for women, we really take our roles very seriously, and we are very duty bound. And so I used to, feel like that was my order of priority. And I stumbled with the healthcare problem a few years later, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's when I had the time to reflect and introspect and see my order was completely upside down. So it should be me first. If I'm well, I can take care of everything, then my family, and then the work. And I know it may be sounding like it's easier said than done, but um, honestly, if you start taking time for self-care for yourself, even for a few minutes every morning, it doesn't need to be a whole chunk of an hour if you don't have that flexibility. And, practice mindfulness, find the way of meditating or going for a walk, whatever that is for you. Have your cup of coffee with just, being fully present. Little self-care things like that can give you a lot of leverage and a lot of miles to really go forward. And I used to not believe in that, but I'm telling you, it works. Like I would like, how does that, like that stuff gets thrown throughout the day? I get complicated patients. Life is full of surprises, this and that. How do I keep myself grounded? But that investment of time in the morning and few minutes in the morning and in the evening can really make a difference over time. And then, of course, in that few minutes of feeling, grounded and starting your day with a positive intention and affirmation, you're also setting the tone for the day, and you're figuring out what's my day looking like, what are my boundaries, when do I, stop this, when do I do this, what is my, priority towards my family, and then, work and so forth. So there's a lot of really gain that one can have by really practicing some of these things. And like I said, the goal is self-compassion. The antidote is self-compassion. Like we can really get into the cycle of guilt and self-hatred and self-criticism and feeling like I'm not good enough everywhere and I'm not doing enough. But that only perpetuates the negative cycle, in a sense that the more I'm feeling inadequate, the more I'm feeling I'm not good enough, that lowers my motivation. That actually lowers my ability to achieve what I want. It depletes me. And if I want to really get to having slightly more healthier balance where I'm managing my roles better, self-compassion is the way to go through it. I have been on the other end where I try to be even harsh on myself and hard on myself. And I see that with so many families and parents and kids who I work with. And we have found that that's not the way to go. Self-compassion brings compassion towards others. And only when I do that for myself, I can do it for others. And so, you know, mindful self-compassion is another whole like category of research where they found that that's found to be super effective method to live more fulfilling and happy and content lives. So, we'll probably do another, kind of exercise, maybe a Slido poll again, or just a discussion amongst ourselves about, how you found a moment to deeply connect with your child, what challenges and what strategies have helped you, so we can learn from each other. And then, I guess the takeaway homework is to practice. we have to practice this. I think it sounds all great in theory. It makes sense when you're listening to a talk, but it really it resonates well, but it really doesn't translate until you practice. So again, that is another few minutes you need to take out. But this is a worth it investment, I would say. So with that, I will stop the presentation and open it up for discussion. Thank you.